Hey everybody, Jay here. Welcome back to the shop here. As you can see, we're going to talk about chainsaws and sharpening. I wanted to make this video on some real quick basics. There's a bazillion videos on the internet of how to sharpen a chainsaw, but I'm going to add a couple things that will help you dramatically. Now, there's different techniques and tools and devices and blah, 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 but what my video is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to show you the basics, but I'm going to show you also some tips on the physical saw itself, the files, and yeah, a couple other nitpick areas that you may not have considered. So yeah, let's get right into it. First things first, let's get into real quick the parts of the chain that you need to pay attention to and the terms I'm going to use in this video. I'm try to keep this short and sweet. So let me show you. So if you're like me, you've probably watched several other videos, but anyways, this part right here is your depth gauge, and this part right here is your cutter. Cutter and depth gauge. Cutter, depth gauge. Say it with me. Now I know it's tough for me to focus with the GoPro, but you have a left cutter, left tooth, and then a right tooth. You see the angle difference? Oh, let me focus here. See the angle difference? Right tooth and a left tooth here. I specifically chose this saw because we buried this thing in a stump, and this these cutters are absolutely smoked. So this is a good demo saw to see it brought back. First thing to consider when sharpening a saw, right out of the gate, is file. If you're still using your grandfather's file from back in the 1900s, you need to get rid of it. These files, I don't care what brand it is, they have a shelf life. So if you're still holding on to a file that's like smooth as glass, you're not doing anything for yourself. What I personally run, and this video isn't sponsored by them, I run Black Widow files. You can get them on eBay. Pretty sure you can get them on Amazon. These are the best. You want to know why? Because they smell like diesel. They smell like kerosene. If you pop this open here, this cap comes with, what is this, an 8-pack? I know you can't smell on YouTube, but they smell like diesel. And the files actually have some type of oil coating on it, and they're individually wrapped in some plastic paper. So that's pretty slick. So again, Black Widow. Get yourself a good file and get yourself something with a good handle, something you can get a good grip on. Don't be trying to hold the actual file like a barbarian. These points are sharp here. Get yourself a file holder. For me, it's just this turned piece of wood. So that's number one. Get yourself a good file with a good handle that will set you up for success. And remember, these have a shelf life. You can't be using this 400 sharpenings because they get smooth. That's tip number one. Tip number two, your file. Your file gets dirty as you file your saw. You're gonna, if you have a sharp file, again, you're not using your grandfather's file, this is going to get dirty, this is going to get full. They make what's called a file card, but you can do is grab a Powerade bottle or Gatorade bottle, drill a little hole in it, and then what I do is, here, let me show you, hopefully you guys can still see. Slide the file in like that. This is gas and oil mix. Now give it a quick shake. I wouldn't do this in your wife's kitchen or your living room, but give that a quick shake. The gasoline, you can use kerosene, you can use diesel, you can use pretty much anything, any type of gas cleaner. And then when you pull it out, drill a smaller hole in your file. When you pull it out, most, not all, most of those shavings are going to wash off in your fuel here. So that's tip number two. After you do one side of the chain, clean your file off. Also, if you're just using a wire brush, these file teeth have angles. So you want to file at the appropriate angle to clean out the channel. Think of it like a candy cane. It's not directly around, they go at an angle. I know you can't see it on camera, but that's tip number two. Make sure you maintain a clean and sharp file, because other than that, you're wasting your time. Again, this saw, we just cut a really large stump with this saw. These cutting teeth are dirty. There's a bunch of grit in there. So what you want to do is you can take a wire brush, and just clean out that groove. See that? See how that tooth just came back to life? Look at this tooth. Let me pick you up. I know it's hard to focus. Look at this tooth compared to this one. Doesn't take much. Look, I can even do it with one hand. Clean up the clean up the tooth with just a wire brush before you go sending your file through there. It's easier to do one side at a time. See? Every single one of these teeth are dirty, and the gullet is full of crap. So take the time and effort, either use compressed air or wire brush. Clean each teeth before you file. See, this tooth still has a piece of wood on it. There we go. Tip number 4, buy a good quality non-safety kickback chain. Those kickback chains are nothing but garbage. They're going to give you more trouble. You shouldn't be using a saw with a safety chain. Anyways, if you see here, you see how this chain, this is an Oregon chain. See how it has this line in it, this depression in it? That is so you can match the angle with your file here, which we'll get to in a second. But buy a brand name Oregon steel, buy a brand name Oregon, brand name chain. Don't buy some cheap stuff on China, Amazon that comes from China. Buy a name brand like Oregon or steel. Get yourself a good, proper chain. It's gonna have the correct hardened teeth and whatnot. So that is the next tip. The next tip, get yourself a vise. Get yourself either a vise you can put on your workbench, or get yourself what's called the stump vise, and maybe I'll overlay a photo. That's gonna hold your saw down tight. That way you don't have to worry about holding it. You can focus on file. I've seen guys put vices on 2-inch receivers for your back of your truck. Yeah, invest yourself. You can get vices for under $40 for just a cheapie, just to hold the bar. You don't need to be forging on it. You just need something to hold the chainsaw so you're not struggling. So get yourself a stump vise. I'll overlay a photo. Or get yourself a conventional vise bolted down. That way you're sharpening. You can take your sharpening to the next level. So the saying goes, when you're sharpening chainsaws, that one side is generally speaking going to be sharper than the other, because you're either left hand or right hand dominated. For me, I'm right hand dominated. So me being on the saw like this is comfortable for me because I'm pushing with my right hand to file the actual raker. Now let me show you a little trick, a little tip, so that way you can maintain your dominant hand sharpening the whole time. So we just pretended that we did our left hand cutters here. So let me color these links here so we know where we're at. So these are the 2 links we're working with. One's a left side cutting tooth, one's a right side cutting tooth. What I'm gonna do is, again, I was just right hand dominated, so I was sharpening like this. Right? Now we're gonna switch to the other side, the other angle cutter. So all I'm gonna do is literally take my link of the opposite side. I'm gonna run it around pretty much at the same spot. I colored the side of it. And then I'm gonna take my saw, loosen it, flip it over, and I'm gonna put in the vise. I'm gonna put in the vise this way. All right, where? Now let me bring you guys in. Let me show you. You can see that the saw is upside down. We just did this cutting tooth. Now on a chainsaw chain, they alternate, so left, right. Sometimes you have 2 rights, then a left, and then 2 lefts and right, whatever, it doesn't matter. But we just did this cutting tooth here. Now we're gonna do this cutting tooth. And as you can see here, I'm just readjusting, but you notice what stayed the same? I was the same hand. My right hand, my dominant hand, is the filing hand. You see what I'm saying? And so on and so on, I just work my way. So flipping the saw over, plus you have the nice flat bottom here, you can get in a real nice comfortable position. You're not fighting the hand wrap. If you have a full wrap chainsaw, that's going to be another story, but doing it this way, by flipping the saw over, it's going to give you a heck of an advantage, because I always sharpen right hand dominant. I do not change hands. I sharpen every single cutting tooth with my right hand, because I just flip the saw over like this. So needless to say, that's the best way to do it. So again, like I mentioned, get yourself a good quality file, but also get yourself a good depth gauge. Now they make different variants of depth gauges. So let me dig out, I have 3 of them, depending on your saw and your pitch and your bar length and blah, blah, blah. They make all different types. So let me dig out the 3rd one. All right, so like I pointed out in the beginning, this is your depth gauge and this is your cutting edge, your cutting tooth, whatever you want to call it. There is a gap. This cutting tooth sits so many thousandths of an inch above this depth gauge. So pretend if we take a, well, actually, let me show you. When you have, speaking of depth gauges, they make several gauges. This gauge here, as you can see, this is a hard and soft wood. This is for 3/8 chain. This is another one for 3/8 chain by West Coast Saw. This is another one by Oregon, depth gauge. And this is another one by, who was this by? This is your generic, I think you get at Home Depot. So let me just basically show you how these work. So basically, as you can see, this is a skip tooth chain, meaning we have a tooth, 2 links, tooth, 2 links, tooth, and so on and so on and so on. This is called a skip tooth. But anyways, a depth gauge, as you can see here, we have some parts and some pieces here. But if you look, if I put this down here, on this cutting tooth here, resting it down, you'll see that I don't see the depth gauge. That means my gauging is proper if you rest this on here. This is just a generic for 3/8 chain. It also has the angles for sharpening. So this is like if you're entry level, you can kind of, you see how this has a left and then a right. This kind of helps you file, if you will. But anyways, putting the gauge on, you can see here it says 0.30 thousandths of an inch, and you can't see that cutting tooth sticking up. If you saw that cutting tooth sticking up, that means it's too high and you need to follow it, you need to cut it down. So it's tough to tell, but you can see how this bridge here is raised 0.30 thousandths of an inch from the side of the metal here. So I don't think, all these are still pretty good, but as you can see here, that one's just sticking up just a touch. So what you would do is you would just take a file like this and you would just zap it down till it's flush with the side of your depth gauge here. Now they make, this is another one. This is by Oregon here. Again, it's the same principle. Where I put the tooth here, resting, you can see how it's just sticking up a little bit. This is the one I like. This is by Oregon. Again, you can see it's opposite. You have 30 thousandths of an inch difference between this opening and here. So your cutting tooth, if you will sit in that opening, and this will rest. And then if your cutter is high, your depth gauge is high, it'll stick out and you just file it smooth. Here's another tip. If you don't have any of those fancy file gauges, depth gauges, excuse me, rather, take a standard file. Watch this. This is going to blow your mind. Lay it flat. Now this is going to land on about maybe 2 or 3 cutters. You should see, I don't know if you can see on camera, you should see an air gap. Yeah, you can see that. You should see a gap between the depth gauge and the cutter. You see that? Now I could just move it right along here. Same thing. Even if I just rest my file on, having cutters at different lengths doesn't matter as long as you maintain a gap. You see what I'm saying? Now watch, call this tooth number 3, 2, and 1. Watch 1 and 2. If I push the file down, see that gap from the depth gauge to the cutter? Now if I come over here, same thing. I have a gap on tooth number 3, and I have a gap on tooth number 2. Just another quick poor man's way to do it. So now as actual filing goes, get comfortable. Let me move you guys back. Well, let me show you the actual mechanics of it. I know it's not the best quality, but do you see this etched line? If you buy a name brand saw like Oregon or Steel, it's gonna have this line in it. This line here, let me zoom out and it'll make sense. Remember that line. When I say line, that's, I'm gonna move you guys back. I think you're out of the way there. So when I mention that line, you wanna see how I'm changing the angle of the file? You want to maintain a parallel line. So let me overlay a photo and let me draw another line parallel with the file here. That's the angle you wanna maintain. And you simply just, the file's gonna cut on the forward stroke. As you can see, I kind of just let it back. I'm not cutting on the return. And that's it. See the shiny new metal? You want to make sure you get in there. You want to get a good corner here. This is your working corner, as some guys will call it. But anyways, let's do another tooth here. So we're in. We're matching our file, keeping our file parallel with that line there. And we're just going. Right hand dominant. I can see some metal chips coming off. And that's it. If you hit the strap here, it's no big deal, but that's a sharp tooth. Again, I could do it again. You don't need to complicate it. That's it. See? Shiny. Hitting the strap, again, is no big deal. As you see, I've been doing it for a while, so I get pretty quick at it. But you don't have to go that fast. You can take it slow. That's it. Well, folks, hope you guys enjoyed. This tip of flipping the chainsaw upside down is by far the best thing since sliced bread as far as sharpening goes. I actually prefer it because, like I said, you have a nice flat bottom here, and you can get right up. You can lean right up, and you can do you can work your magic here. So, hope you guys enjoyed that video. Again, this video wasn't necessarily the technique of sharpening the chainsaw. There's a million videos on there. But more or less things you can do to set yourself up to be more successful. Again, a good file, a good vise, flipping the saw over, upside down like I did here, that's going to allow you to maintain your dominant hand. Also, like I said, the gas and the diesel to clean your file, and then getting a good quality file. These are all proper things that you want to. Also, the depth gauge. I don't know if I went over that. I think I did. A good, proper depth gauge. So yeah, needless to say, hope you guys enjoy. God bless. Thanks for watching. And like I always say, we'll see you guys out in the woods.